The Trump administration looks for ways to streamline aid to persecuted Christians in Iraq. Vice President Mike Pence met yesterday with USAID Administrator Mark Green, who recently returned from a trip to the region. He was joined by a delegation of American lawmakers and leaders, including Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback. Pence says, quote, America is committed to restoring historic Christian communities in the region ravaged by terrorism and war. Joining us now is Knox Thames, Special Advisor for Religious Minorities, speaking to us from the State Department. Knox, welcome back to the program. Can you tell us about the Christian communities in Iraq today? What do we know about what life is like right now in the Middle East for religious minorities like Christians?
Well, in Iraq, the situation is improving but still very fragile. With our global coalition to defeat ISIS, pushing that virulent terrorist organization out of the country, religious life is reemerging for these victimized religious minorities, Christians of various denominations, but also others like Yazidis. So there's a moment of hope, but their future is far from certain. That's why the United States, under the leadership of Vice President Pence, has launched a really unprecedented effort to surge resources into the Nineveh Plains to assist these communities with the difficult task of rebuilding. Just last week, Ambassador Sam Brownback and USAID Administrator Mark Green went to northern Iraq to tour those areas and to get a better assessment, and we'll be briefing the Vice President in the coming days.
What do you think now, noting all of that's happening, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing the Christians and other religious minority in the Middle East? Now, as you mentioned, now for the most part, ISIS has been defeated.
Right. It's going to be, how do we create an environment where there's space for religious diversity? There's a mentality that is really spreading around the globe of exclusivity, of either my way or the highway. So the United States, we're very committed to doing what we can to advocate for the rights of religious minorities, to talk about the benefits of interfaith tolerance and pluralism, because a society is going to be healthier, more stable, more prosperous if everyone can participate. And that means Christians, that means other faith communities have an equal footing and be viewed equally by the law as citizens vested with the same rights as others. So it's going to take education, it's going to take ensuring that governments are defending these groups, not persecuting them. And that's why we're working very hard here to try to build a global coalition of like-minded countries that can promote the rights of Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East and around the world.
And we'll continue to follow the work that you do there with the government. I want to switch gears because you also recently spoke just several weeks ago at an event called the Coptic Solidarity Conference. Tell us about that. Tell us about the issue you spoke about.
Well, Egypt is a leading country in the Arab world, the most populous country. It also has the largest Christian community, about 10 million people who identify as members of the Coptic Orthodox Church and other Christian churches. There you have a real problem with ISIS, that while they've been defeated in Iraq, they are operating in the Sinai, and we've seen over the last year a really horrific amount of attacks against Christians and also other Muslims who think and believe differently from that terrorist organization. So the United States, we stand with the Egyptian people to defeat terrorism, and we want to lend our support to make sure that these communities are protected. At the same time, we are concerned about how the Egyptian government, we think, is going too far in that effort by clamping down on all civil society groups and political dissent. And we think that's actually going to make the problem worse in the long run. The other issue is concerns about sectarian attacks against Christians in Upper Egypt and the lack of accountability. We continue to see instances of mobs forming to complain about a church operating in a small town. And when the police come in the aftermath, after houses have been burned and people being beat up, the Christians are arrested in addition to some of the Muslim attackers. And yet no one's really held accountable for that. And that's going to be a key piece to seeing stability in southern Egypt between Christians and Muslims, is that those who perpetrate violence are held to account.
So many challenges there and so many things to consider, whether we're talking about Iraq or Egypt. Knox Thames, Special Advisor for Religious Minorities at the State Department. Thanks so much for the recap.
My pleasure.